Michael Brown was nominated by President Bush to a number of Homeland Security positions and twice confirmed by the Senate.
Earlier this evening, I spoke with Mike Brown, the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He's coordinating disaster relief of a dozen federal agencies and the American Red Cross.
All right, former FEMA Director Michael Brown, thank you so much for joining us.
Michael Brown, former FEMA Director. Thank you, Michael, as always.
This portion of the Michael Brown Show on BCR is brought to you by Fire TKO FST, the highly effective, non-pressurized portable fire suppression tool. Go to www.fireTKO.com to learn more.
And now, the Michael Brown Show on BCR.
So welcome to the Michael Brown Show with the Blue Cell. I'm really happy today. I've been trying to get my friend Brock Long on for a couple of months now, but we've both been fairly busy. Brock and I were just reminiscing before we started when we first met each other, and it was, I think, during the '04 hurricanes that hit Florida, right in the middle of an election year, as I recall.
That's correct. Yeah, 4 major hurricanes in 6 weeks. So it was Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Gene. And then you had Katrina and Ike and Rita. And then you go out of office. The country goes 11 years without a major landfall and hurricane. I come in and then get popped with them again, just like you did.
And I remember sitting back and watching and just thinking, well, Brock will be able to handle it. I'm glad he's handling it and not me.
Yeah, it was, it was extraordinary. Mike, that coming into an agency like FEMA, it's incredibly complex. 21,000 employees, multi-billion-dollar budgets. I mean, you're the largest insurer. You run national continuity programs. You hand out 98% of the grant array for Homeland Security, and you're responding to all these events. I had 2 months to assess where we are before Harvey, Irma, and Maria, and then the California wildfires. And I think it was 220, 230 events. So I had one new event every 3 days for 2 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Good grief. Yeah. Well, so tell everybody, what are you doing today since you've left?
Well, yeah. When I stepped out of the role as FEMA administrator, I went back to Haggerty Consulting as the executive chairman. And Haggerty Consulting is a full-service Homeland Security emergency management consulting firm, and nationwide, we're doing work all over the country. And it's awesome because I get to come in and drive, corporate strategy, serve as a subject matter expert, get my hands dirty with projects all over the country. And we're doing a lot of work with COVID right now. I think we have probably 30 to 35 different projects with COVID taking place right now, helping people understand reconstituting, anything from major airports to helping them understand what they're entitled to from all the money that comes to them as a result of the CARES Act or FEMA, and how to sequence that money, put it to work, and then ultimately try to become more resilient as a result of going through what they went through.
Well, speaking of resilience, this is one reason why I really wanted to talk to you is it seems like forever ago, pre-COVID. We can now mark everything post-COVID and pre-COVID, or ongoing COVID, I guess.
Sure.
You and I were at the Colorado Emergency Management Association meeting up at Loveland, Colorado. And I just happened to catch the tail end of the presentation that you were giving, the keynote address, I think. And you and I both talk about resilience, which we both agree is, to some degree, becoming a buzzword. But you talked about resilience in a way that I'd not heard anybody else talk about it on a real personal level. Describe what you were telling the audience that day.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a big question, Mike. So, one, there's all these resilience movements in our country, and resilience has become a big buzzword. Everybody's a resilience officer. Everybody, has a resilience program. And there are several nonprofit movements that are focused on resilience. But the problem, as I see it, from where I sat as FEMA administrator, is what are we all striving for as a nation? What is tying all these efforts together so that we can measure it and do the greatest good? And then, one of the things that's really bothered me after going through all the events that we went through is I don't know if we're actually focused on the root cause of problems as to why disasters are getting worse. Now, we do focus on climate change, which probably eats up 95% of the resilience discussion, but we don't focus on the lack of financial resiliency, which is eating us alive right now as a result of COVID-19. And it's something that, I believe the climate's changing. I believe in climate change. Yes, we have to implement residential codes and building codes and reward communities that do it by revision of the Stafford Act, which we can come back to. But we also, Mike, have got to go back and teach the fundamental basics of how money works. I mean, think of it this way. We have told our youth in this country that you got to go to college and the SAT score is probably one of the most important scores in your life. But yet it's really your credit score, and we teach you nothing about it.
Nothing about it, right?
Nothing. And so what we saw was not the impact of disasters being made worse by income poverty, which means I don't make enough money to make ends meet. It's asset poverty. It's, Mike, you could have made six figures, but yet you're so highly leveraged. You have a $530 car payment a month. Your kids are in college. You live in the right house. You drive the right car. You have no money in savings. And asset poverty measures anywhere between 3 to 6 months worth of operational savings, right?
Right.
That a majority of Americans don't have that. And so if you look at some of the statistics, 70% of Americans right now cannot put their hands on $500 cash. Okay, that's a problem, because what that leads to is you don't have the ability to overcome the simple medical emergency, a tornado. You're probably not properly insured. You haven't insured your house correctly or up to a level in which it should be, or your car, whatever it may be. And then not to mention if you're a small business owner, do you have business, interruption insurance, and are you paying for that as well?
Right.
And so I really believe that, yes, we have to focus on climate change, but we got to go back and do some real education and change the Department of Education standard on, if you take out a loan to go to a public university for $150,000 or $200,000 over a 4-year period, you should have to complete a financial resiliency 101, 102, 103 class before you can ever assume that entire loan.
And most people would never even think about what's the ROI, what's the return on investment of that $150,000 loan I take. What's the value of that, and it's worth it or not worth it?
Right. And so one of the greatest quotes, I think it was Warren Buffett or one of them, I can't remember, but compound interest is the seventh wonder of the world. Those who get it earn compound interest. Those who don't pay it for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Right.
I'm very passionate about it. It's not that I'm trying to hit people over the head. It is, man, we have got to get out. And if you want to change disadvantaged, communities and the life of a disadvantaged community over time, then you've got to offer free access to financial resiliency education and how to break negative cycles with money. And, we've got to really concentrate on that. And then when it comes to resilience, Mike, I don't think that Homeland Security or emergency management looks at the right data sets to truly understand risk and vulnerabilities. So imagine if we could look at each community's collective credit score, okay, whether it's Detroit, Denver, Austin, New York, or whatever, or a small town in middle America. If the collective credit score of the citizens there is trending downward over a 5-year period, then what's trending up? Homeland Security issues, lack of insurance, the probability of being eligible for FEMA individual assistance is climbing.
Yeah, right.
So FEMA's not even using these data sets because, one, it doesn't really exist, but two, it would help them respond and understand how complex the disaster recovery was really going to be from a citizen standpoint, a human standpoint, if we could see that data. But if we know it's going down, Mike, then what do we do to get it to go the other way? And what if you could get the collective community credit score up to a level to where you eradicate problems like civil disturbances, the divorce rate? Think about it. You cure the insurance gap in these communities. The possibilities are limitless, but it takes time. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's something that would have to take place over years. We would have to have government, to change its mind on education and even nonprofits, like nonprofit organizations, active in disaster. I hate the term active in disaster. They could be active on a blue sky day doing financial resiliency training, so there's a lot of things that could take place.
This portion of the Michael Brown Show on BCR is brought to you by the Free Agent Mindset publication by Scott Jones. If you think that going out on your own and being self-employed is the riskier option in life, think again. Go to Amazon or www.thenimsstore.com and click on Software and Publications for more information.
It's funny you mentioned that because in the when we really started talking about after 9/11, ready.gov and all these things, all these little programs we put together, the Citizen Corps and all of that, the focus was always on having a certain amount of medications, a certain amount of cash, whatever, to be able to bug out and get away from the hurricane, get out of the zone of probability or whatever. To your point, most people can't put their hands on $500. Right. How can we expect them to go evacuate? How can we expect them to go anywhere?
We're not building a true culture of preparedness with our current campaign efforts.
No.
Nobody is preparing for 3 to 5 days unless you're really just on this extreme. You're over here to this.
Right. And nobody hears that. But nobody hears that message, Brock.
Right.
I don't think they hear it.
Yep. And, we're going to have to figure out ways of helping people do low to no cost, preparation to extravagant I can afford a generator for my house type preparedness. But, here's the other thing. But Mike, in our society, unfortunately, and here again, I don't mean to sound like I'm hitting people over the head. Let's face it. We expect other people to know CPR. Okay. Yes. 1 in 4 of us is going to have to, according to the Red Cross, if I remember correctly, and I hope I'm not, touting them incorrectly, and I think Gail McGovern told me this, 1 in 4 of us is going to do CPR in our lifetime. Well, when's the last time you've actually gone through CPR training, first aid training? And if you haven't done it in the last 3 years, the whole philosophy of CPR has changed dramatically.
Right.
Totally changed.
Right.
And so, we've gotten accustomed to just saying, hey, 911. I mean, the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act turned FEMA into 911.
Yes, it did.
And so we've got to go back and instill a level of, capability within our citizenry and stop looking at everybody as a liability and that we have to take care of them. We've got to incorporate them into our plans and into the culture of preparedness that does not exist.
And I think, too, we've become so technology dependent. When you talked about the whole culture of and the whole philosophy behind CPR changing, now it's, where's the AED? Where do I find the AED? Oh,
where's the AED? Yeah.
There's not one like where I'm at right now, out in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. There's not one within probably 10 miles.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully going through COVID, and one of the other things from a resilience standpoint, going back to the bigger question, Mike, is resilience and no national strategy. As a result of going through what we went through during my time in office, we were able to get Congress to listen to change the law to create the Disaster Recovery Reform Act. So this is great. Today or yesterday, FEMA put out a notice of opportunity for the new BRIC funding, which is building resilient infrastructure and communities. Well, this is a direct result of me saying, it doesn't make sense for communities to have access to mitigation dollars after they've been blown up by a disaster. Yeah. We've got to put it up front. So what the law said was now that 6% of all the PA funding, public assistance funding that FEMA puts out in any given year will now be put up front for pre-disaster mitigation. Well, this year, the NOFO just hit. There's $500 million across the country available for, which is a drop in the bucket still, but it's way more than we ever had.
Right.
Each state gets $600,000, and then there's a competitive pot of $500 million to go out and do infrastructure-based mitigation. Why infrastructure? Well, let's go back and talk about the root cause again. Mike, do we need a bigger FEMA to solve all the problems of this country when it comes to disasters?
Well, you tell me, because
well, we tried that. 1992, when Andrew hit Florida, bigger FEMA was called upon. We need a bigger FEMA. You went through Katrina and a nightmare there. Okay, bigger FEMA was needed. I go through Maria, bigger FEMA. Well, that model's not working, folks. That's not working, Congress. Maybe we need to go back and look at who actually owns the infrastructure that's breaking that we depend on. And it's not FEMA. It's not the federal government. It's the private sector. And while we talked a good game about public-private sector partnerships and what can Walmart do for me, we've got to change this whole mindset of how do we make sure that the public infrastructure providers, we're planning in a manner that helps them come back up and running. Like, for example, power and utilities. Power is one of the greatest community lifelines that we identified. not owned by the government, largely privately owned. But what if local governments started to redesign their first initial debris plans to open up roadways to make sure that the power company had access to their lines and their towers and their generators?
One of the
rather
biggest
than just 911.
One of the biggest problems we had in Katrina was getting all those pre-positioned assets, getting all of the investor-owned utilities, all of those trucks in because roads and bridges were out.
This portion of the Michael Brown Show on BCR is brought to you by the Blue Cell LLC Training Division. With over 100 courses available within the areas of crisis, consequence, and incident management, the Blue Cell has online, virtual live, or in-person options. Go to www.thebluecell.com/training to sign up today.
And here's the real story around Puerto Rico. We got plenty of food and water to Puerto Rico. We got $2 billion worth of commodities to Puerto Rico. Here was the mistake that was made from planning for years and years and years. Nobody ever looked at what was on the island that could be incorporated into the response initially without the federal government having to bring anything to it. The first phone call that should have been made, and this is my mistake, was to the grocery store retail chain of saying, how much food's on the island?
Yeah.
And Mike, you know what they would have told me? There was a 30-day food supply on the island that had never been planned into because after Pekimra, FEMA was drilled on logistics that we had to run it all for everybody rather than think holistically as to, all right, right now where you are, in Denver, Santa Fe, Colorado, whatever city you're in, how many bottles of water already exist there that aren't owned by the federal government that could simply be planned into usage by the local community? And so when we found that out, it caused me to start asking the question of what has to be working in any community that if it is not working, then people die or life routine is severely disrupted. So we came up with the FEMA Community Lifelines Doctrine. Okay. 7 lifelines. The first tenet, safety and security, which is really interesting right now in the debate. Personally, I believe without safety and security, you cannot have a viable community. You can't even respond or implement recovery if you don't have safety and security. And you know that as a result of going through what you went through in New Orleans. Then you have food, water, and housing. Okay, not shelter, but housing. And we're not talking about food and water as bottles of water or MREs. We're talking about large supply chains. Who owns the supply chain? Does the government own a bottled water factory? No. Okay. We don't own the food supply chains, right? We have to make sure that they're bolstered and that they're, that locals understand the supply chains that support their community, not just FEMA bringing in MREs and water. Okay. Then you have communications. A failure in communications is the worst failure you can have. And you know what we were doing, Mike, in Puerto Rico? We were kicking the private sector communications experts off the planes that were initially going into Puerto Rico for the sake of food and water because we were chasing the fast food news, entertainment news aspect. We should have been sending Verizon and AT&T in first because the problem was not getting their hands on food and water. It was communicating to people where to go.
Yeah.
And I'm being honest about
the food was there.
Right.
You didn't get the communicators in to let people know where the food was.
That's right. And so we were not going to make that mistake twice. So, when Hurricane Lane was threatening Hawaii the same year or the following year, I can't remember, it all runs together. The first phone call we made was to the grocery store retailers to understand how much food was on Hawaii.
Yeah.
And then we decided to backfill that we doubled the number of days of food so that if we lost the big water ports and the airports, we would have at least a 2 to 3 week food supply on the island until we could get the logistics processes back up and running.
Yeah.
And, so this lifeline concept is FEMA doesn't own the infrastructure. So we've got to put the people that own the infrastructure, the fuel, the gas, the power lines, the water infrastructure, the food safety, food supply chains, or public health, private hospitals, or supply chains for PPE. We've got to put them in the catbird seat of guiding our response to help them not take over as incident commanders, which is what was the result of having gone through Katrina. And it backfired, in my opinion. It's a broken model, and it's got to change, and that's why we started to do it. So here's the thing, Mike, your original question of resilience. Of all these movements that are out there, if the lifelines that we've identified, the 7 lifelines, are the things that break and people die or life routine is disrupted, then why are we not all collectively working together to make sure that those lifelines never go down?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know either. Everybody's set in their ways,
Yeah.
and we have blinders. We have blinders, and we've got to be able to, increase
Well,
the strength of our infrastructure.
increase the strength of the infrastructure. And I guess I'm far enough away from it now that I think there's this institutional, you can call it institutional, political, the bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. But there's this institutional roadblock that says we've been going down this path. You want us to make a right turn or a left turn or a U-turn or whatever else it is. Getting that done politically is a mammoth task.
Well, and here's what I'm afraid of as a result of 17 and 18, as a result of COVID-19. I hope Congress does not have a knee-jerk reaction and try to reinvent the wheel without asking the experts and the people that have a voice that know what's going on. Here's the thing. COVID-19 further validates the need for community lifelines. The health and medical lifeline completely broke, and it was a logistics break. It was a logistics failure.
Right.
It was private sector logistics failures. We can't get our hands on PPE because local hospitals don't store this stuff. We can't get our hands on PPE because the vendors that supply the hospitals, all their contracts are to China, Malaysia, other countries. And if they lock it down, then our supplies are done. And it's not just ramifications for COVID-19. Think about our soldiers.
Sure.
Where does their PPE come from?
Right.
And so from a national security standpoint, we have got to bolster these supply chains in the future and realize that what you've asked FEMA to do, to come in now and get PPE to hospitals, they're going to do it. But here's what happens. They're going to lock down the private sector, normal supply chains that should be up and running, and we should be facilitating getting back up and running because Congress hits them in the mouth, the media hits them in the mouth, and FEMA's going to, protect itself, and they're going to do what you tell them to do. They're going to take orders, and they're going to do it. But the private sector supply chains are going to absolutely suffer if you want FEMA to run all the logistics for PPE in the future and vaccines.
So I think you and I are both at this point doing a little, I'm not Catholic, I don't know whether you're Catholic, but we're doing a little confessional here. Confessional we're doing is, and I think people really need to understand this, when we take over logistics, to your point, I think the phrase you used, which I love, we lock it down. If I've got to get ice, water, whatever it happens to be, I lock that sucker down.
Right.
I take everything I can get.
And we probably pay more than the normal private, retailer for the supplies. I mean, I don't know if that's, fact or not, but I can tell you that, the private vendors would love to have a contract with FEMA rather than a mom and pop shop somewhere in a small town.
Right. And
that's part of the problem that we got to correct. It's, and I don't, to me, if we rethink it, we're at a critical point with COVID-19. I mean, it's I have a deep respect for a lot of people inside the health and medical field. My dad and my sister are both doctors. I worked very closely with HHS like you did, and there's some good people. But look, the response to H1N1 back when I was a state director in Alabama was not strong, and then we saw a collapse of that again here. We cannot, if we go through this event and we don't change course and revise and streamline the way assistance is going to be put forward for the next public health event, then we have learned nothing, Mike. And, and I think we're at this point. If we want HHS to lead the next pandemic, well then, man, we've got to start handing this bad, this bad event back to them and coaching them and training them on how to do it. Or we need to rip it away and have them serve as subject matter experts and go ahead and start to reinvent the incident command. But here's my fear with that. FEMA's job is already complex enough, Mike. I mean, you run national continuity. You're the largest insurer in the country, and now you want me to be the pandemic, experts. you also run 98% of the grants out of the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, you're pushing $2-3 billion worth of grants every year on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security. And we keep wanting to put more on FEMA's plate to where the business enterprise, in my opinion, is breaking if it hasn't broken already.
Want to keep up with Michael Brown and his various shows? Find him on Spreaker, Michael Brown Unplugged, or on iHeartRadio. You can also stream his daily AM radio shows on KHOW and KOA.
I'll give you a visual that I've always said. Proper disaster preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation. It looks like a chair with 4 legs, Mike. The seat you're sitting in is your community. It's stable as long as those 4 legs are attached to it, but those 4 legs represent different things. Right. One is a true culture of preparedness that's financially resilient, properly insured, ready to take action if there's an active shooter event or whatever they may face. The second leg is a strong and robust state and local government, which does not necessarily exist in some states. Some states are way stronger than others, but some states don't even have their own rainy day fund to cover disasters if FEMA doesn't come to town. Yeah. It's a moral hazard, in my opinion. The third leg is the private sector and going to the community lifelines and recognizing that they control our destiny, not FEMA. Fourth is FEMA coordinating the firepower of the federal government down through a governor, ultimately to the incident command, to stabilize the situation, not make you whole, but stabilize the situation. Well, when all 4 of those legs are attached, that chair is pretty stable, and we go through tons of, Mike, how many disasters did you manage that never even made the news because all 4 of the legs were attached?
Right.
When you went into Louisiana, there was 1 leg attached. It was called the federal government, and the chair was very unstable. Yes. When we went into Maria, the same thing occurred. Well, if that's the correct formula, and it was the same in Andrew, well, what the heck are we doing? We got to work to bolt all 4 of those legs back onto the community seat, rather than just saying, get bigger FEMA, get better FEMA. Yeah. And people need to back off the agency and respect the fact that the people inside that agency are golden-hearted public servants that are trying to do the best that they can. And they're forced to work in a god-awful sea of policy regulations that prevent them from being innovative and efficient.
I will never forget in Katrina telling the entire staff, I understand there's this morass of rules and regulations. If you have to break the rules and regulations, break them. I'll take the heat for that because we just got to do what we've got to do.
Right.
But to your point, they are encapsulated in that morass of rules and regulations. So telling them that is one thing. Empowering and getting them comfortable doing that is an entirely different affair.
Right. Exactly. But I think the emergency management profession too, one of the things that was a result of Pakemra, and I get it, I understand why we went to this massive effort to train incident commanders. That's great. But we got a whole slew of incident commanders in our field, but we don't have anybody that understands disaster cost recovery and how the money works. And we need to rethink the training. If you look at 17 and 18, Mike, according to the statistics, the amount of money that's going out the door as a result of 17 and 18 is more than the 9 previous FEMA administrators combined. So you scratch your head and you can't even wrap your head around this. Now, that has nothing to do with COVID.
Right.
This is trillions of dollars. So now what you got is you got FEMA public assistance. Okay, well, let me back up. The 17 and 18 money, Congress appropriated it, as I understand it, to 20 federal to fund 91 different recovery programs.
Wow.
So if you're a mayor, how do you even begin to understand what you're entitled to, how to sequence this money together, to put it down and do what's right, avoid duplicative natures, make sure that the IG doesn't trip you up and find something wrong. That's what we do at Haggerty Consulting. And the reason we do it is because there is no skill set out there within our emergency management profession to help mayors and leaders understand this. It's a huge void in our field. Well, now with COVID, you've got the public assistance funding, which is hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, going out for public assistance. And then you've got trillions of dollars in the CARES Act. And you know as well as I do, something else is going to get passed before the election.
Sure.
And it's going to make things even more complex. Trillions of dollars are out there on the table. And if you look at the federal Treasury's first report about the COVID funding, some states that were allotted, $2 billion, $3 billion have less than 1% out the door.
Yeah.
But yet they've got to spend it before March 31 because of some arbitrary date that was imposed on that money. So we don't even know what the impacts are. There's so much money that's out there, and it's a knee-jerk reaction to throw money at it rather than being calculated and methodical and understanding that the impacts of COVID-19 are going to be with us for years and years. We've got a lot of work to do to reinvent the training and the job that we're asking emergency management to do.
Well, I got to tell you I think your insights are spot on. I think people that are listening to this are listening to two guys that went through a lot of fire, that understand really a lot of the things that need to be done. It's just getting the political willpower to make those they truly are fundamental changes. And whether we accomplish that or not, I don't know. But hopefully this conversation will spark interest in some people start thinking a little differently about how we do things.
Right. Well, I will also be the first one to argue that the emergency management profession needs a solid lobbying function. Who's our lobbyist that truly is speaking for the emergency manager, changing laws and making sure that Congress understands that we are heard. And, rather than having FEMA reinvented for us through the way PCMRA was done,
right.
Right. Who's our voice? And maybe we need to create some new friendships in the insurance arena and pick up some friends and pick up some people that know how to lobby to make sure that we do things correctly rather than making them more complex and adding to our plate.
Yeah. We need to be driving the train as opposed to the train driving us.
Right.
Brock, I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to reconnect again, and see you again soon. All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye.
The Blue Cell and the Michael Brown Show on BCR thank the following advertisers and collaborators: